Some people in this world are on the front lines of the struggle between good and evil, and some, like us, bear witness. I'm Therese Apel.
And I'm Nicole Crowell. You may have heard us as we worked on stories and series about law enforcement and crime. And it's safe to say we've seen some of the best and worst of human nature.
We decided there's no greater honor than bringing you the stories of the men and women who seek out the monsters, who speak for the victims, and who put the pieces together on some of the biggest Mississippi crime stories of our time. Welcome to Investigation Homicide. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Investigation Homicide. I'm Therese Apel. I'm here with my, as we always say, partner in crime, Nicole Crowell.
Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. So we're doing something a little bit different today. Instead of talking about homicide, we're going to talk about how a killer can how a criminal can escalate. And we have a guest that I'm so excited about, my friend Sara Ricks. She's a lieutenant at Ridgeland Police Department. Sarah?
Hey.
Hi. Thank you for coming.
Yay. We had Amanda Johansson, a detective at Clinton Police Department, scheduled to be here as well, but she had to go do cop things. So, and you almost had to go do cop things too.
Almost. Still holding out on that.
We know that in this line of work, we're always at the danger of something happening, and we've got to run.
Mm-hmm.
So
I thought about that when Amanda texted us. I was like, oh man, like when I get off, I know when I'm gonna get off at the end of the day.
Right.
I never thought about it. Y'all can't just like.
I don't know.
I got things to do.
My spidey sense started tingling. I just looked down and like, oh, there it is. Every time.
It never fails if you leave your phone behind, like if you leave it in the car while you go in somewhere or something like that. Something is always going to go wrong while you don't have your phone on you.
Absolutely. But if you have it on you, nothing will happen.
Right.
Or if you're doing a podcast, something will happen.
Right. As we sit here,
if Sarah has to run away real quick, then I guess
Sarah's
it'll just
phone
be me.
Face down on the couch. I'm just not even going to look.
Well, so one of the things, obviously, we brought you here today to just kind of talk about several things. Obviously, you and I probably got here about the same time, got to the metro area about the same time. Our last stop before this was Brookhaven, right?
It was.
So we're kind of homegirls,
yeah.
And we've bonded over that, especially in recent times. And we won't go into too much detail, but there's been a lot going on in Brookhaven the last.
There really has, and my parents and my grandparents are both still there. So Brookhaven has a special place in my heart, and I watch it, and it's just
a lot going on.
A lot going on.
It's a good way to put it.
A lot going on.
Right. So start off, tell us about you. When did you decide you wanted to be a police officer, and kind of what got you on that path?
Okay. Well, when I was, 18 years old, I went to college at Gulf Coast, and my parents, they were like, here's $20 a week. You've got a meal plan. That's it. And I'm like, all right. And the local police department in Wiggins, the cops would always eat Taco Bell, where all of us ate because, we could only afford Taco Bell. They're like, hey, we've got a dispatch position open. Do you want it? And it was overnight. So I was like, oh, I could work this overnight and I can go to class. And my parents were like, you need to focus on school. You need to do this. Well, I was like, heck yeah. I get paid. I think it was probably minimum wage or a little bit over, but that was huge money to me. And I get my own insurance. I was like, I'm on my own.
For a college kid.
And I hid it from them for a little bit, for a good while. But I fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it. I had a chief, Matt Barnett. He retired a few years ago. And, man, he took a chance on me because I was just this little 18-year-old kid. I think I showed up in, like, a church outfit for my interview and, like, these sparkly shoes. And then he was like, they called me princess for the longest time. And one day I went to him and I was like, I think I want to go to the police academy. He was like, oh, good luck, princess. And I jumped into it, and I've been here ever since. I've never regretted that. This is kind of exactly where I want to be.
Well, and I want to say when I first got here, I think one of the first times I saw you was on a crime scene somewhere. I mean, that's pretty much where I meet people. That's my life, and probably yours too. But that said, it's like I noticed you because obviously you don't see a lot of pretty blonde girls in the middle of a crime scene, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, wow, like no offense, but I was like, that doesn't fit there, it didn't mean anything at all, except for just you're noticeable in a group full of cops.
Right.
And so I remember through the years I would see you there. And when I went to WLBT at one point, I think I knew you by then. And I was talking to a group of folks, and one of them said, "Who's the pretty blonde cop at Ridgeland?" And I was like, "It's got to be Sara." And they're like, "Yeah, I mean, like, man, she's so pretty. Like, she doesn't look like a cop." And so we just laughed about that. But to me, it's always been funny once I knew you because you're so tough, and because you're strong. You're all the things that one would expect of someone in your position. But I always say that it's a good thing to be unassuming. So when everybody looks at you and sees the pretty blonde cop at Ridgeland, that's actually kind of a good thing because they don't see you coming.
It has worked in my favor, especially on when you're talking to suspects and everything. They're like, "Oh, she's not the brightest one." And sometimes you have to play that way. You have to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm just here," And it really sometimes, yeah. But a lot of people have been like, "Oh, I know who you are. You work at Ridgeland."
Mm-hmm.
But I do like to say Ridgeland has a lot of pretty female officers.
Yeah,
they do. They do well.
Yeah, and they're all tough.
Right.
Like Ridgeland has some of the most jam up female officers. Like everybody at that department is great. I wish I could name them off one by one, but then we'd be here all night because I'd talk about how great they are.
Well, and the other thing is too, it's like I think you can tell the quality of a department as you watch it through the years sometimes, and Ridgeland's one that has always been strong since I've been here. So.
We have very, very high standards when it comes to Ridgeland, but you can definitely tell we are held to a high standard, and we know we're held to a high standard.
Right. Well, and it's been like that with both of the chiefs that I've known. It's kind of like, officer, no matter who you are, female, male, anything, you're going to do your job right.
Absolutely. And I've been through 4 chiefs there. Chief Houston was my first one there. He's the one that hired me. And he wasn't there long. And then we had Randy Tyler, who was great. Just a real cop's cop. You knew why he was there. And then Chief Neal and now Chief Myers. And, they were all brought up in the Ridgeland way. I believe, I know for sure Chief Neal and Chief Myers started at Ridgeland and have come all the way up. So they have a lot of pride in our department, and they make sure that standard stays high. A lot of times every department's short, and our chief is like, "I'm not putting people in here just to fill spots." So I'm really, really proud of that. I will never go to another department because I'm so proud of how Ridgeland operates.
Yeah, and that's something that's awesome to be able to say about the place you work.
Absolutely.
And you all seem like friends too.
Every time
we're around them, I'm like, "Oh, these people actually like each other."
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, and sometimes it's like more of a sibling family environment, and a lot of people roll their eyes when they say, "Oh, they're like family." We are like family, and we stick up for each other when we need to stick up for each other, but also we are a brother's keeper at Ridgeland.
Yeah.
If you see somebody not on the right path, you're expected to step in and say, "Hey, cut that out. You're not going the right path." And I do appreciate that because I think that departments have gotten away from that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's showing in some departments.
That is true. Well, and so to kind of expound on what we are talking about, through the years, you and I have been tangentially involved in the same cases.
Right.
A lot. There are some that we can't talk about because they're not resolved yet in court. Things like that. But we do have one that we want to talk to you about today. And I'm just going to let you open the door on Samuel Young. Tell us how that case started off, because that's one that to the people that are listening and watching, the escalation of this story is very interesting to me because it's kind of textbook. And while he never ended up being the guy that you're going to see on Dateline exactly, it kind of shows you how that goes.
Right. He is definitely the monster in your community. And I'll start off with how I first came in contact with how this started. His criminal career started way before I was even in law enforcement. But I had been in Ridgeland for about 2 years. I was just a rookie cop. We get a call to one of our apartments for an assault that had happened, a break-in and a sexual assault. And I get in there. The victim, says I was doing my laundry. I walked into my bedroom. There's a man standing in my bedroom. And as a female, that is everybody's worst nightmare.
Mhm.
You know, you live alone, you walk in, there's just a man standing there.
Mm.
And if you don't scream, I won't hurt you. So I respond to that. She's telling me what's going on. You know, I'm getting the detectives coming. I've called my supervisor. And when I tell you how incredible this girl was, she knew what the guy was wearing. She clocked that he was on the phone. She gave us details that helped so far in this case that I didn't know at the time. She was just talking, and I was like, I'll just write this down. And later on, you know, with cell phone records and what he was wearing, all that, it came back. And it turned out to be a complete stranger assault. She had never met him, never knew he existed. And he lived in the apartment complex behind hers and had jumped the fence and was basically just looking for a victim. So his DNA came back with a hit, which is why he was arrested. Because, you know, if he hadn't been in the system already, we probably still wouldn't know who did that to her.
Now let's backtrack a second.
Yeah.
You said he was on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
He was talking on the phone during the time of the assault. So the phone would ring, he'd pick it up, and he'd talk. I'll be there in a minute. I'm over at my buddy's house. So, you know, I'll be home in a minute.
He's just having casual
and then
conversations.
he'd hang up, and then the phone would ring again, and he'd get irritated and kind of argue with the person. And she deduced from that it was probably his father or a family member. She paid attention to what was said. It was incredible because she just gave us right back, like, this is what he said. Verbatim, this is what he said. And I don't think that in a situation like that, I could have done that. I don't know if y'all have ever been in a fight or flight. I know you probably have, but you react completely opposite of what you think you're going to react, you know?
Absolutely.
And your senses dull, and, you know, you start to survive. And the way that she was able to articulate everything that happened to her from beginning to end, and she never, ever changed her story. And in saying that, that is not typical with assault victims. You don't always remember everything. Trauma, things will come back to you slowly. And I think that that's a misconception for a lot of people. They're like, oh, she changed her story 4 or 5 times. Well, that's normal. What this girl did was incredible. She absolutely helped herself.
Well, and so talk about that. Like, when you've got a victim like that can tell you the whole story clearly, coherently, and over and over again the same way. I mean, obviously we know she's telling the truth because we know how it turned out. But did that kind of fry your circuits a little bit?
It does. You know, a lot of people say people react differently to trauma, and you are like, yeah, everybody reacts differently. But then you see the Scott Peterson, and you're like, oh, I wouldn't have reacted like that. And so the way she reacted, it was just kind of like, it took you aback a little bit. And you're like, this is very, very specific. How are you so specific? Because other people that we had dealt with are, a basket case, completely shut down. Since that, and I was only a 2-year officer at that point, but since then I have seen all edges. I've seen people react completely differently to trauma. Some people hyper-focus, some people just absolutely disengage. So now that I'm further along in my career, I do know that could happen. But at that point, I was like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you guys went along, what did they find out about, how did he come across her? I mean, we know she didn't know him. How did he pick her?
So we aren't completely positive on how he picked her. We do know that he was in that area quite often. We would get calls of a male matching his description, looking in windows, standing in hallways, doing lewd acts. And every time our officers would go out there, he'd be in the area. Now, they couldn't ever prove if it was him or not, but he was always in the area when we would get those calls. And he lived in the apartment complex directly from behind her apartment. And we did find a trail behind her apartment it went directly from her apartment across the fence directly down to his apartment. I think we had a bunch of officers out there and had different officers run it, walk it, halfway do it. And we could get back to his house in about 30 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. So it's right there.
It was right there. The DA's office helped us with that. Our detectives did such a phenomenal job on that case. I mean, they really did go through it and make sure that they had all their ducks in a row on that. But we do. She lived on a back apartment. Her window was open, not open, but you could see inside of the window. So we think that he probably just saw an opportunity and took it.
Now, you said his DNA was already in the system.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that?
He has a very lengthy criminal history. I believe he's got bank robbery through JPD, and he does have a prior sexual assault on his history. And I believe a car theft is in there as well. So he was well known criminally.
So I realize we've got a lot of people that listen and that watch and that kind of thing that probably, they read a lot of true crime. They
Right.
do all that. I mean, that's kind of our people.
Right.
When you've got somebody like this, what are you afraid of for the future when you look at that? Like, if y'all hadn't caught him, where's he going next?
Right. This is textbook. You see this happening with serial rapists. I mean, you go back and you look at predators that stalk their victims. They'll stalk their victims, and they will assault their victims, and then it almost always escalates to murder. I mean, look at Rodney Alcala. There were several victims that lived before he escalated to murder, and the problem is he learned if he left them alive, he would do jail time. So a lot of times they will escalate in their violence.
And sometimes it's to cover up. I mean, sometimes it's if I don't kill him, then I'm going to jail. And sometimes it's the escalation of the thrill they get from it.
Right. And then you look back and on a lot of these and you see their history, there will be peeping Tom calls. There will be indecent exposure calls, especially around their target victims. So if later on they're accused of sexually assaulting a woman, then that's usually when they are doing those things. And then, if they have other victims, that's usually where the peeping in their windows and exposing themselves. You can just kind of see it slowly happening.
Sure. Now, if you're watching or listening right now, if you're watching or listening live, you can comment. You can leave a question up there, and we'll see it come through, and Sarah can help answer it for you. So feel free to do that if you want. Sarah, when we talk about, it's not just obviously we see it in this case because we know where Samuel Young was going to end up.
Mm-hmm.
We know how this one turns out. But let's talk for a second about, that creepy guy that you know. Like, we've all known a dude that we're just kind of like, man, like, I'm not going to the prom with you.
Right.
Or sometimes just generally, like, sometimes there's people where you get that feeling in your stomach, and then a few months later, you're like, called it.
Knew it.
Yeah.
And it's different than the guy that you don't want to go to prom with. Like, there's always the guy that's over enthusiastic and you're just like, and you might say he's creepy, but you don't mean like he's creepy.
Right.
This guy is what you have to worry about.
Right.
What should somebody look for in that guy?
That's a tough
question.
That is such a tough question. I always say follow your gut. Everybody has such good intuitions. If there is something about a person and you just don't know what it is, there's a reason. Like, that is just a survival core instinct. There's just a reason. Your neighbor hanging out around your door when they've got no business hanging around your door. Somebody getting too close to your kids that they have no reason to be close to your kids. Like, you have to start looking at these things. People who are friendly but give you pause, you really, really have to start listening to yourself on that.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about this a lot about trying to push that feeling away and just being like, oh, it's no big deal or whatever, or you trust somebody. And we've all put ourselves in that position where we are places we should not have been, with people we should not have been with, or like walking down and we're just like, okay, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
We'll be fine. Nothing bad's going to happen.
Yeah, and there is something instilled in us, especially as Southerners.
Right.
You have to be nice to people.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes if you smile at that stranger and you know like something's off here, and it's a two-sided, like you could be nice to somebody and it save your life, or you could, I think that's why we are so nice sometimes, is because we're afraid of how people will react to us.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can be unkind to somebody and they will take it out on you. But I do think that sometimes we are kind to people, and sometimes you don't have to be kind to people, especially strangers.
Right.
In Walmart, if somebody says, hey, stop, you don't have to stop. Your mom's not going to come after you for ignoring the stranger. It's just stuff like that we have to unlearn some behaviors, I think.
Yeah.
And
I think
trust your gut.
Right.
Really.
And in the South, I think we push down that it happens too, because it's such a taboo subject.
Yes.
And nobody really wants to talk about it. We all know it happens. We see stuff coming out all the time about it. But it's like this taboo thing where it's like, not my guy, not my son, not my boyfriend, not my uncle, not my grandfather. Like, sorry.
Yeah.
Like, you still have to be aware, and you have to stay vigilant. Like you're saying, you have to stay vigilant and trust your gut.
Right. And the biggest thing that I think with trusting your gut on that, especially if you have kids, is what are these people's motives?
Mm-hmm.
Why is my son's Sunday school teacher, why does he want him to come over and he doesn't have kids my son's age? Or why does my neighbor want to hang out with my 15-year-old daughter? Even if it's a female neighbor, that's weird. And a lot of times like, oh, they're our friend. We see them all the time. They go to church with us, or we're in the same book club. Quit letting people that you don't know around your kids. Quit letting your kids spend the night at places that you don't know these people extremely well. And I mean, that goes for family members too. If creepy Uncle Ed was creepy Uncle Ed when you were a kid, he's still creepy Uncle Ed when you're a kid.
Yeah.
And that's completely off subject, but I like to get on that people are almost too nice and they don't want to say no. And when it comes to kids, like, you've got to learn to say no.
On the note of the kids, I was a junior high teacher for 3 years in North Mississippi. And if you know me, you know where, but I'm just going to leave it wide open because I'm about to tell a story that they're not going to like that I told. But if you didn't want to get written about or talked about, you should have acted better.
We're going to put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was
writing
a
it down
junior
on
high
my
teacher,
notes.
and I was also the cheerleader sponsor. And one day, one of the girls' mamas came in to me and said, and the girl was also in show choir, and she said, I don't understand why my daughter doesn't want to go to cheerleader camp. She wants to go to show choir camp. And I said, well, she was show choir before she was a cheerleader, whatever like that. And she mentions that the show choir teacher, who was a man, had said that, yeah, it's a good idea for her to come, whatever. And as a young, somewhat pretty single teacher of junior high boys, I was used to junior high boys having a crush on me. It's not an ego thing. It's just junior high boys.
Yeah, boys will have crushes on, you're the
trees.
teacher. You're the teacher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just mentioned, I said, well, I think she might have a little bit of a crush on, we'll call him Bob. That's not his name, by the way. I said, she might have a little crush on Bob, whatever. And the mama said, oh, no. And I said, yeah. I mean, don't worry, like if she wants to go, that's okay. We can do fine without her. And then like a few days later, I'm getting called into the principal's office. And I walk in and Bob and the mama and the little girl are sitting there. And she's an 8th grader. And she's in tears. And Bob is so mad. And the principal's looking at me like, how dare you? And the mama's just over here looking really concerned. I'm like, what is going on here? And so they're like, why would you say this? What are you trying to imply? Blah, blah, blah. Well, there's this massive overreaction to my making an offhand comment that an 8th grader might have a crush on her music teacher, which, I mean, I had crushes on my coaches.
Yeah, that's
that's
not weird.
It wasn't until it was, so.
And that's,
Yeah. So while they're all overreacting about what did I mean, what was I trying to say, what's going on here, I just walked out there like, what? But I think I was not cut out to be a teacher personality-wise because I was always making people mad. You know, like some mama was always mad about something I said in the classroom. She didn't like my sense of humor.
I think a lot of
person to be a
teachers.
teacher.
I think a lot of teachers would identify with that sentiment still now, though.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you're not making anybody happy.
Still now,
Right,
though. Yeah.
Right. But by the end of it, I left at the end of that year. And I start hearing rumblings, and it turns out that teacher, that music teacher, was convicted. I want to say, and I could be wrong.
Allegedly.
Well, he was convicted.
Okay.
We just don't know it for.
of sexually abusing. I want to say it was 6 of those girls.
Oh my goodness.
So that said, one
that's
of the
why he
other
was
teachers,
pissed.
after all that, she said, you know what, we should have listened to Therese Apel because she knew. And the thing was, I didn't know until
Right.
everybody lost their mind. I mean, until then, it was just, oh yeah, you know, just normal teacher-student dynamics. And then all of a sudden, everybody's way too emotional about it. And I was like, oh, I don't know what this is, but I don't like it. That's something to look for sometimes. That overreaction has a lot to say about what may be going on behind the surface.
Oh, I just
Absolutely, because a normal coach would be like, you know, like, no, whatever. But bringing you into the principal's office to say, I'm innocent. I can't believe you would say that about me. Do you know what I've done? That's another thing people need to look out for is the deflection of, I've been a preacher for 37 years, or I have been a baseball coach for 10 years. And it's never, I didn't do that. It's, do you know who I am? Do you know what I've done? Do you know who I know?
Do you know why I would never?
Do you know why I would never? And it's never, I did not do that.
Tell me something, and this is just an offhand question, but I always say that the more somebody says you can't prove it, the more that means they're guilty.
I don't have statistics or like times that's happened to me.
Right.
But I am sure that if you got, like, I'm not a detective, so
Right.
I don't do the interview and all that. I just dealt with stuff that was on the road. But I'm telling you, if you got those detectives in here and took a poll, they could tell you.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
It's the denial, like it's the denial of everything, but the actual denial that sometimes can show you.
Well, so I have another question for you, and it has a story that goes first.
Okay.
So when I was in college, I took all the criminal justice classes because I was going to be an FBI profiler, right?
Weren't we all?
I know we all were.
Weren't we
Well,
all?
not me. When we were kids was when that stuff was really big, you know, and I'd read all the books, John Douglas, Robert Ressler, Roy Hazelwood, done it all. So I was in a class that was taught by Chester Quarles, who was one of the longtime names at Ole Miss in the criminal justice department. He was at one point the head of MBN, and at another point the head of the crime lab. Like, he was a big deal. He was one of the only Mississippi State troopers white Mississippi State troopers that would guard Martin Luther King Jr. when he came in.
Okay.
So long story short, he was my professor. And so the first day we all come in, we all sit down. It's a class of probably about 50 kids. And I always sit on the front row because I'm a big dork and I want to be able to ask questions. And I was wearing a light blue shirt, and it was kind of low cut because, again, that's kind of my thing. And I had my hair up in a ponytail. And he walked in, and I made eye contact, and I smiled, and he goes, and he starts everything. And he tells the class, he said, all right, I want you to look around the class, pick a male and a female who are most likely to get attacked. So everybody looks around. They pick this little skinny boy over here, and they pick this really beautiful blonde girl who's wearing this little form-fitting pink dress. And he was like, no, you're wrong on all counts. And I'm just wondering what's going to happen, because that's who I would have thought too. Well, it's a medium-sized dude who just wasn't paying attention. I don't remember him because I wasn't worried about him once he pointed me out. And he said, it's her. And I was like, what? Why? Well, it was because he said, I walked in, she made eye contact, she smiled at me. It's that nice thing. He said, as I walked past her, I could look straight down her shirt, and if I wanted to grab her by the ponytail and drag her out, I could.
I would have died.
He said, as soon as I grabbed her ponytail, I could control her.
I would have died dead.
I mean, at that point, I was a little bit like, okay. But, that was something that I have never forgotten. So how, if you are just going about your normal day, I mean, you're not thinking about getting attacked. Clearly, there are things we can do to protect ourselves that we don't think about. How do you keep from being a target?
Pay attention to your surroundings. I mean, that's kind of the easiest thing that I can tell you. Keep in the back of your mind, hey, this is not a safe world. A lot of people have the mindset of that's not going to happen to me. I live in a certain area. I live in a certain town. I drive a certain vehicle. I'm not the one they want. And you just never know if you're going to be in the right place at the right time for something bad to happen. You just need to be aware of your surroundings at all times. It's always good to have, protective stuff on your keys. But a lot of times it's just not paying attention. It's walking down the aisle on your phone. It's getting into your car at the grocery and scrolling through Facebook. Your door's unlocked. You're sitting there looking at it, just kind of zoned out for a minute. Even when you pull into your house, you just never know what is going on in other people's lives to where that could happen to you. And it's the same thing driving on the interstate. Pay attention to what's going on around you because you don't know what these other drivers are doing. We've gotten into a world where our phones are everything. And I'm horrible about always being on my phone. But when you're on your phone, it takes you out of reality of what's going on. And we get so comfortable and so complacent. Paying attention is the best thing you can do to save your life. Really, it is. I mean, you can take all these jiu-jitsu classes and martial arts, and you could just be the baddest thing walking. But when it happens to you, you have that fight or the flight thing going on. And I would say that the best thing that has helped me in high stress scenarios is I think about things before they happen. And I think that that's a trauma response, but I'm not completely positive. But, when I was on night shift, I'd drive by a gas station and I'd say, what if I were in the bathroom at this gas station that I go into every night and I walk out and there's a man holding up the gas station with a gun? What would I do? Thank goodness that never happened. But I felt like if you keep going over stuff like that, like if you're sitting in the car, what would I do if somebody tried to open this car door right now? Have a plan. Have a plan before the thing happens. Because once the thing happens, plans go out the window.
That's actually really good advice.
Yeah.
And I know y'all probably think ahead because y'all are in that world, but I'm one of the ones that do sit on my phone on Facebook, or scroll down on my phone down the aisle.
Right.
And I feel like it would help if in the moment you're not going, oh my God, what should I do? But at least you have some sort of plan of action.
Right.
Well, and it's fight or flight or freeze sometimes.
Right.
Exactly. And a lot of times people freeze, and people that you don't expect to freeze will freeze.
I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I'm one of them. I was in a situation with somebody I thought I could trust, somebody that I thought there's no way that they were unsafe. And I let them into a space that, again, they were not somebody that would ever, in my mind, be unsafe. And I was assaulted. And then when it was over, I just told him whatever he needed to hear to get him away from me.
Right.
And just with everything that happened, I just sat there, and it was kind of like he would ask me a question. I'd be like, okay, good. Yeah, let's go. And so he finally left. And all I could think was, this can never go to court because I just told him everything that he needed to hear to get him out of here. And if it was a he said, she said thing, then everything I said is great for him, Right. And so that's the thing. You have to be prepared for those situations, but just because you think you're prepared, it doesn't mean that you are. And you can be that way. I mean, y'all both know me. Would you think that I would be the one that frees up? No, I would have DNA under my fingernails. I didn't, I just froze all the way up.
And you can respond in different ways to different situations. So a lot of people think, if I freeze, I'm going to freeze every time. No, that's not how that happens. Right. But if you go over situations in your mind before they happen, it's still going to be bad. It's still going to be traumatic. But at least in your mind, you're like, I've thought about this. I think about it all the time is if I'm in a parking lot and somebody tries to get in my car, what am I going to do? I'm throwing in reverse. Hate it for whoever's behind me. I've hit a lot of cars in reverse.
Right.
You're just going to have to do it. And if they get that door open, you just gun it and hope that they can't hang on very long. But and there's other ways to handle it, other ways to deal with it. But if you have a plan for things like that, a lot of people I've heard say active shooters in a grocery store, when you're shopping for your groceries, look to where you can hide. And that's horrible that we live in a world like that. But you don't want to be the person running out into the middle of the aisle.
Yeah.
You just have to make a plan everywhere you go. And I'm just a worst case scenario, Nancy.
Well, you see the worst case scenarios.
Right. I know what can happen, but I've always been that way. My mom will tell you that I have always been a very negative child. But you have to think that way. And when you think that way, your body will start to kind of be like, this is how I react in this situation.
At one point, I had a whole trauma response issue surrounding drive-throughs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ones that have the curb. So, like, once you're in the drive-through, you can't get out.
Yeah.
Oh,
And my thing was always like, somebody
Those are
pulls up and like opens
terrible.
fire on us. You can't even get out of this thing
Yep.
unless you got a 4-wheel drive,
You're a
which
duck.
now I have, so it's all good.
Yeah.
So we have a question
Okay.
on the topic of feeling suspicious of strangers. What would you say? When's it time to get the cops involved?
This is when it gets complicated, because a law has to be broken. And unfortunately, especially if you're in a public place, somebody makes you feel uncomfortable, that's not a reason to go to the law.
Is there a time like that you would just call and say, hey, I want this on the record just in case?
Yes. There are, so somebody standing, like your neighbor,
Mhm.
you come home and your neighbor's in your backyard and they've already kind of been creepy. Like, what are you doing in my backyard? Yeah, I would make a note of that. Anybody that seems to be having an episode, especially one that you come in contact on a regular basis on. But as far as somebody that you see at Walmart and like, oh, that guy looked at me weird, we can't do anything about that.
Mhm.
A law has to be broken for law enforcement to do something about it. Now, did somebody invite your 14-year-old daughter, like a grown man invite your 14-year-old daughter over to his house? Yeah, you should probably call.
Mhm.
Did you find texts on your kid's phone that they're talking to somebody over? Yeah, absolutely. Call. I always say, if you're in doubt, then call.
Yeah.
You know, you'll always regret not calling, but also be mindful of why you call, because we can't do anything about 2 weeks ago. There was a guy at Kroger that touched the back bumper of your car and you didn't like it, you know?
Yeah. Right.
And you also, I mean, I think also you don't want to be, you know, who was the white lady that called the police on her black neighbors that were having a barbecue?
Right.
Because, you know, like, unfortunately, we have people that make it, like, someone like that makes me feel like, gosh, if I called the police right now, am I her?
Mhm.
But on the other hand, if you have a legitimate, like, I've done this before where I've called the police and been like, this is probably nothing. But I just know that when I call dispatch, or, you know, if I call and talk to a detective, it goes on a record somewhere and I'll say, I just want to
Right.
let somebody know this.
Right.
And that way, should something happen, then we know that it's, you know, that something made me nervous.
Right.
And that said, they might have hung up the phone and thought I was insane, but, you know, it was worth doing.
Well, it's another thing. Be aware of your surroundings. You know, don't just see something and call immediately. Say, are those my neighbors?
Mm-hmm.
Are those kids just playing in a front yard? You know, like,
Right.
just take a minute and kind of put yourself in other people's shoes and say, are they being suspicious, or are they doing normal things and
And I don't like it.
I don't like it?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are not self-aware enough to ask themselves that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, Sarah, you and I, and Nicole, I think from working with me all that time, I think probably you a little bit too,
Maybe we'll see.
but we're so used to, like, thinking worst case scenario that sometimes we look at something and say, oh, that's just what, like, to us, it's just like, that's not even a thing.
Right.
But to someone who doesn't see the depth of what bad things there are in the world, they might be like, oh my God, what is that? You know, do you see that a little bit just with people who aren't sure what they're looking at, but you've been a cop for so long?
Right. And I'm a huge advocate that if you think you should call, then call. You know, the officers need to be able to figure out a situation. You know, like if you think it's suspicious, officers need to go there and be like, they thought it was suspicious. I understand why you're doing what you're doing. You know, if they can make contact with the caller, hey, you know, this is what was happening. You just misunderstood. I'm all for that. What I don't like is untrained officers going into situations and not responding properly. That really irks me. But you should be able to call the police and they be able to handle it in a professional manner. I was going to say something and I completely forgot about. Oh, when people call 911, and I have to remind myself of this constantly, it is probably the worst day of their lives. Yeah. You know, imagine how many times you've called 911. I've done it maybe twice. You know, my mom was very sick one time and maybe a couple car accidents, but like for the most part, people calling 911, it is the absolute worst day of their life. And for these officers, it's just another day sometimes. And you kind of have to step back and say, this is very important to them. And I need to handle it like it's important to them, like it would be important to my mom, like it would be important to my grandmother. And the officers that I work with in Ridgeland are like that. And we are trained to be like that.
Yeah, and we do see it often in national news where an officer who is not like that goes to a situation and escalates it past where it needs to be.
Absolutely. And that is a lack of training and lack of background checks. I'm very confident in saying that a lot of these departments are just filling seats and they're not getting the training they need to get. They're not doing background investigations on some of these officers. Like there's got to be a higher standard. We've got to give more into education for these guys.
Sure. Now, to kind of double back to where we were, we've talked about how to stay safe. We've talked about how it can happen to you. We've talked about how you might freeze up, you might fight, you might, you know, whatever. Where is Samuel Young now?
Samuel Young is in prison.
Good. How did that go? How did he get there? I mean, since we left her,
and I'm just going to let you guys know because I think it's important. I don't think that people understand what happens to rape victims after the actual assault. They go to a hospital. They are undressed. They are scraped under the fingernails. There is hair pulled from their head. They are swept down their bodies for any debris, residue. So you're standing naked in front of strangers that you don't know, being touched after you've already been violated. Pictures are being taken of you in your most intimate moments. Then a police officer comes and starts asking you questions over and over again, and they talk to you in a way that makes you feel like you second guess yourself because they need to know the facts. They need to know exactly what happened because when you get to trial, all of this is going to happen again. You know, those victims, after they're done with that at the hospital, they're going to have to go speak to another officer, a detective. Then they're going to have to speak to the people at the DA's office, the prosecutor. And then you've got to go to court. And there are these people that you have never met before sitting in a box, you know, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, court clerks who are going to see those pictures that they took of you. They're going to hear what happened to you, every single bit of it. And then all that is going to be on court record. And those people that can sit there and make it all the way through there are so strong. And it's just a lot for them to go through. So that victim in that case did exactly that. And she did exactly what she needed to do. And it was very, very brave of her. But we have, like I said before, our detectives worked really, really hard on that. I don't know if she would be upset with me saying her name, but Leslie Owens was who worked it. And if anything happens to me, I'll put her on it. But he was, you know, the defense team also smeared this victim. They accused her of being on Backpage, which used to be a site for sex work. And she was not on it. And thank goodness that we checked that and made sure, even in his appeal, after he was convicted and found guilty, he tried to say that that was what happened. And her number was not in his phone, and his number was not in her phone. There was no evidence of any of that kind of activity. And it was just awful for him to have done this, and she was the one that was painted as the bad guy.
Now, I want you to tell the story about the defense attorney. You don't have to say who it was, but when you were on the stand and he asked you about that.
So during the whole trial, this was kind of how it was painted. Hey, she's doing this on the side. She's making extra money. He didn't pay her. This is what happened. And he said, I was Perkins then. He was like, Officer Perkins, do you know what Backpage is? I said, yeah. Yes, sir, I do. I do know what it is. What is it? What's the site, for sex workers? And well, how do you know what it is? So we'll use it for investigative purposes. How do you know that she wasn't on there? I said, because I checked the night of. I did my research. I looked it up just so I could say, not that I thought she was, but just so I could say this didn't happen. And he said, oh, that's not in your report. I said, yes, it is. And I had to turn my report and put it to him and show him. That's why it's so, so important that even if you don't think that this person is doing something, a defense attorney will make it, and that's their job. I mean, it's their job. They'll make it sound like something that it isn't. But it's so important to document everything. If you're a law enforcement officer, even if you think it's little and nothing turned out of it, always document it in your reports because it came back and it was kind of my moment in that.
Hell yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You like being able to kind of put that back in his face.
Because he had put me through the ringer on everything that I had done, which again is his job. And I was a new officer. I was probably terrified to be up there, but I was taught in a way to write good reports, and it really helped in that case.
Sure.
But he was convicted as a habitual offender and given, I believe, life in prison.
Now, how long did it take the jury?
I have no idea on that. I'd have to go back because this was 2015, I think. It was a while back. Yep.
It's weird to think we've been doing this that long.
And that was not the end of him.
What happened next?
So this was another call that I got to go to. Again, I'm not a detective, so I don't get to, but I was a patrol supervisor, so I respond to these calls. But we got a call of a home invasion. When I got there, there's a man, he had, blood on his head. There were clothes all in the driveway. And he said somebody had just broken into his house, 2 guys with guns, and that he had been robbed and they had stolen his car. And so I called the detectives out. I get him medical. All our officers are in the area trying to find the vehicle. And once our detective gets there, the guy who was robbed, he gets a phone call. And his parents had been robbed in Jackson and zip-tied at their house at the same time that this had happened. So, now we've got Jackson PD headed over there. I've got another officer because obviously they seem pretty connected in there. And it is a story that is made for TV. It really is like we don't have enough time for the ins and outs of what happened.
Oh my God.
In this. And I think that the narratives are about 22 pages from all the work that all of our detectives did on this. But the guy who's robbed his girlfriend was actually in contact with Samuel Young from jail, and they had organized this whole robbery to go down. So he got additional time. Huh?
He was calling shots from in jail.
So we, our detectives, he got even more time, and everyone involved was convicted, and it was so much manpower and things, and it was kind of like peeling an onion. You get one thing back, and then something else pops up.
Oh, man.
And something else pops up. And then when I heard that name, I was like, man, and I just know for sure that if he was out, he would just be wreaking havoc.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. Well, is there anything else you want to tell us about him or anything we've talked about that we don't know to ask you about?
I don't know. I think that's
I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
What is your favorite part of being law enforcement?
Oh, there are a lot of favorite parts that I have. I've just learned so much, and you meet such neat people
Right.
through it. And then I also like that a lot of it is a puzzle, and a lot of times you come up in a brick wall and you have to figure out a way around the brick wall or how to fix something. Also, I have found out that there are ways to help people that they don't necessarily teach you in the police academy, and there are ways to go above and beyond. And I really enjoy it. Every day is different, which is what I love. I never get bored at work. I've been at Ridgeland since 2013, And still now calls will come into like the lobby or something, and they'll call and say, I don't know what to do. This is what it is. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Let me figure it out. You know, it's just, it's you always meet just the neatest people.
Yeah.
You get to see people have the worst days of their life and then come back and tell you how everything's changed for the better. You see people grow up. You see kids grow up. You know, you see these little kids that you dealt with all the time, and they go to college and they're teachers now, and you're like, I know who you are.
Or they become cops.
Or they become cops.
Yeah.
They become cops. It's really been a mind thing for me. I found out the other day one of our officers was born after 9/11.
Oh, no.
Yes.
It's impossible. He's like 11 years old.
Exactly. And he's
crazy.
20-something years old. And I'm like,
No, he's not.
that's not possible.
It's not.
Because
Isn't
when
that
I
crazy?
started Ridgeland, I was probably the youngest one there at 21, 22.
Mm.
And now people call me ma'am.
Yeah.
I'm like, quit that. I am not old enough.
Well, and that's, I mean, you know, when I started off telling the story about how you were the pretty blonde cop,
Yeah.
I certainly didn't mean, I mean, you have to be so careful how you talk about women now,
Yeah.
because I didn't mean like all you were was pretty.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, I've watched your career, and my
Yeah.
career has done the same thing, but it does not feel like it's been
No.
more than 10 years. It's been more than a decade
It has.
since like we were the kids.
Yeah, we're still 22 years old.
As far
just
as I'm
trying to
concerned,
make it,
like,
you know?
We act like it sometimes.
Yeah, it's. I just sometimes I catch myself and I'm like, oh no, they're coming to me for answers, but I really have learned so much, and I look back and I'm like, man, what a ride! It's been such a good ride.
So are you gonna work until you retire, or
Yeah, are you going to do this forever?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have to. No, I love where I am. I love what I do. Man, the people that you work with, it really.
Yeah.
We sit there and we bicker back and forth. Couple, you know, the coworkers that have been there a long time with me, and it makes it nice to know you're going to work to a place that you like. Also, if I don't know the answer, I know about 15 other people that know the answer, you know, and that are going to help me. Nobody at Ridgeland has ever said, I'm not going to help you. So I really, really enjoy it there. I don't think I'll go anywhere else
that's awesome.
until I retire and I open up a flower shop.
There you go.
Yep.
I love that.
And Nicole will tell you that I always say, like, one of these days I'm just going to quit and I'm just going to work in a flower shop.
Yeah.
And then one day somebody told me that there is actually like a psychological thing about people that want to work in flower shops and
Really?
trauma. I don't remember what it's supposed to
Well-
be, but there we are. I mean,
You
Well, I
eventually wanna
text
see
you
something
all the
beautiful.
time about winning the lottery. I'm
Right.
like, when we win the lottery, we're going to have a compound. I will have a vegetable garden.
right.
Perfect, because I can't grow
Exactly.
shit.
Yeah. Well,
I'll take care of the animals.
Right.
okay.
Yeah, we can do
You
that.
milk the cow.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I mean, we've got it all figured out. I
think
just,
so.
but
And
you
it'll
got to
be the
play the
safest place
lottery
on
to
earth.
win the lottery.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to buy us lottery tickets, just, send them this way.
Yeah.
'Cause
Absolutely.
we'll forget to. I always forget
To play the lottery?
to play the lottery.
I get
do.
nervous. I'm like, I'm wasting $1.
Right.
But then I'm like, what if?
Yeah.
Because I'll buy, like, if I buy a lottery ticket, then, like, for 2 weeks until they draw the names, I'm like, I've won.
Yeah.
I've
Right.
spent the money before it's
In your
even
head,
done.
yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, I'm rich now. I'm just waiting on them to call the numbers. And I always get so disappointed when they call the numbers.
And
Like,
you're not even close, though.
yeah,
And
no,
meanwhile, like,
not
you're-
even
you're, like,
one.
way off.
You're like exponentially more likely to get hit by lightning than to win the lottery, but that doesn't stop me from hoping.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And I only get one, like, once or twice a year. Like,
Yeah,
when it,
my mom
when
always
it's-
puts them in our stocking stuffers.
Yeah, I
she
think
gets us like
everybody's
10
does
different
that.
ones. She
Um,
randomly started doing it one year, and I was like, "Keep it coming."
My
Right.
husband's parents do that, and that's so nice to
Yeah.
look in your stockings. You're like, oh,
It's
I could
fun.
use this.
yeah.
And then
One day it's going to be the Mega Millions. And
yeah,
Greatest Christmas ever.
absolutely.
All right. You got anything else, Nicole?
I think I'm good. We're at our hour now.
Yep.
I filled it up. Thank you so much for coming on.
I really enjoyed it. I was nervous, but I think we're all right.
Everybody
Well-
says that.
I promised Amanda that we would do this again when she can come.
Okay.
And so we will do this again
We
when she
are.
can come, and you'll just be our other guest.
Okay.
You'll be our
Yeah,
I'll be like a
it'll be like a
part-time
girls'
guest
co-host.
host. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
the girls'
Yeah.
corner.
Good deal. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate all y'all. If you're listening to us later or whatever, have questions, go over to our Facebook, Investigation of Homicide, and you can ask questions there. We'd be glad to answer. Follow us, like us on Facebook. You can find us on all your favorite podcast platforms. So do that. This episode is brought to you by Daniel Anderson and Audio Alchemy. He is our man behind the curtain.
Yeah, yeah.
And he is the one that makes it all work and makes it all look so good. And we are very grateful for him. So thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate you. And we will see you next week. Sheriff Tyree Jones will join us next week since we missed him last week.
Yay.
And so join us then. Thanks so much for being here.
Bye.